You're about to find out what's happening in the North Dakota legislative session. Your host of the Legislature today is Dale Wetzel, managing editor of Great Plains News and the Great Plains Examiner. If you have questions or comments or to watch the show, go to GreatPlainsNews.com. GreatPlainsNews.com. The Legislature today is brought to you by the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing County, the Credit Union Association of the Dakota, the University of Mary, the North Dakota Corn, Soybean and Grain Growers Association, and the North Dakota Ethanol Council, the Northwest Landowners Association, Touchstone Energy Cooperative, North Dakota Rural Electric Cooperatives Association, and members Minn Kota Power and Great River Energy, the North Dakota chapter of Concerned Women for America, the Expressway Inn and Suites, where a good night's rest costs less, and the Peacock Alley. It's time to get started. Another hour of the Legislature Today is on the air.
This is Dale Wetzel. This is the Legislature Today radio program. We are coming to you from the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota. If it's a wonderful place to have a drink and a meal, if you're so inclined, the bar is filling up. And with folks, actually the coming home from work crowd is pretty much come and gone. We have the folks who have come here after they've been home. And it's a wonderful place to have a drink, have a meal. It's a wonderful restaurant. The food is good. The servers are friendly, and they've been a wonderful host to our show since its inception in January. And I would encourage everyone to come to the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota. Coming up in a moment, we're going to be speaking to Audrey Grafsgaard. She is a person at the legislature who answers people's questions who come to the legislature. Maybe they're not that familiar with the Capitol or the legislative process, and Audrey sits at a booth near the House and Senate chambers, and when people approach her with questions, she helps them. And we're going to be talking to her about some of the questions that people ask and just how the job works. It's really quite It'll be. I think you'll find it quite fun and quite informative. But first of all, let's talk a minute about what the legislature did today. One of the things that the legislature did was it put another constitutional amendment on the ballot. Now, prepare yourselves, North Dakota voters, for next year, for the June primary and the November general election, because you're going to have some rather interesting proposed constitutional amendments, at the very least, in both elections. Especially in November of 2014. Today, the legislature gave final approval to an initiative that says that any ballot measure, any initiative that's put on the ballot by the voters, when the initiative process is you gather petition signatures to put something on the ballot, either a law or a constitutional amendment, you can bypass the legislature and put proposals directly on the ballot in North Dakota through the initiative process. And this constitutional amendment says that an initiative that has a significant impact on the state budget must be voted upon in the November general election instead of the June primary. The logic of this is that any initiated measure that has a significant impact on the state budget should be decided by as many voters as possible. Another element to this proposed constitutional amendment is that no initiated constitutional amendment, in other words, a constitutional amendment that's put on the ballot by initiative petition by the people, no initiated constitutional amendment may be approved for petition circulation, if it orders the legislature to spend money for a specific purpose. So in other words, what this amendment is doing also is it is putting certain subjects off limits to the initiative process. Now, if you don't like this idea, you'll be able to vote against it in November of 2014, because everything that I've just mentioned will require voter approval to take effect. And I mentioned other initiated or other constitutional amendments that will be decided. These have all been put on the ballot by the legislature this year. In November 2014, we will have Measure 1, which was put on the ballot by folks who oppose abortion, and it says, and I'm just reading the entire text of it, the inalienable right to life of every human being at any stage of development must be recognized and protected. That is measure 1. And there will be a rather interesting public debate about what that means when it's applied to laws that the legislature approves. There is also going to be measure 2, which is a ban on mortgage taxes and real estate transfer taxes. Now, North Dakota doesn't have mortgage or real estate transfer taxes at present. This whole amendment is a project of the National Realtors Association, which has been encouraging its members to put language to this effect on the ballot in states where this can be done because they want to, and understandably so, discourage the idea of mortgage or real estate transfer taxes. That would be measure 2. Measure 3 is what has been called the three-headed chancellor. It would replace the Board of Higher Education and the chancellor of the state university system with a 3-member higher education commission, which would essentially ride herd on policy and administration for North Dakota's 11 public colleges. These 3 higher education commission members would be appointed by the governor and serve 4-year terms. And they would have charge of North Dakota's university system. They would take an administrative role over the system, which the current part-time appointed Board of Higher Education does not do. That will be measure 3. And measure 4 was the initiative that I mentioned at the beginning. It restricts, it says that initiated measures that have a significant impact on the state budget must be decided in the November election. Also in the legislature today, we had House approval of a more strict penalties for driving under the influence. The House approved this bill, and the Senate still needs to do so. Among its elements are, if you are drunk and run into someone and kill them, you will have a minimum prison sentence of at least 3 years. You will be eligible to be convicted of a Class A felony, which is a considerably more serious crime than 3 years in prison. And if you do this, if you have a accident when you were drunk, a vehicle accident when you were drunk, and you have a previous DUI conviction, and you have a subsequent, if you are drunk and run into someone and kill them, and you have a previous drunken driving conviction, you will be sentenced to at least 10 years in prison. This is one of the things that this bill does. Also, it says that someone who is a first drunken driving offender, if they have a 0.16% blood alcohol content, that person's minimum jail sentence will be 2 days, and that person will be fined $750. They would be able to have 20 hours community service as an alternative to jail time. A second offense carries a minimum sentence of 10 days in jail and 100 hours of community service and a $1,000 fine. And also, a second offense would require at least 12 months participation in what is called the 24/7 program, at which the person is required to report twice daily to the local police station to have his or her breath tested to see if that person has been drinking. Well, with that said, I wanted to turn to our guest this evening. Her name is Audrey Grafsgaard, and she is a former librarian for the Legislative Council, which is the legislature's research arm. It's a support organization for the legislature, and she is working this session in a carrel. It's a enclosed area near the House and Senate chambers, and people congregate there. This area is in the Capitol's Memorial Hall. It's a great open area, and there's a space there where Audrey works, and folks come up and ask questions that get information. And I wanted to have Audrey on and speak to her about what people ask about. Welcome, Audrey.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
It's great to have you. But first, Audrey, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
I'm from a small town called Antler, North Dakota.
Antler, North Dakota, home of the Centennial Quilt.
Yes.
Outstanding. Where is Antler exactly?
It's 50 miles straight north of Minot, right on the Canadian border.
Okay, where'd you go to high school?
Antler.
There was a high school in Antler?
There still was, yes.
I'll be darned. And where did you go to college?
I did.
Where did you go to college?
I attended the State College of Science in Wapaton for 2 years, and then I transferred to, it used to be Mary College when I went, now the University of Mary.
Okay. And when did you go to work for the Legislative Council?
I was hired in 1982.
And what was your job?
I was actually hired in the steno pool area of the Legislative Council, and I worked there during the 1983 session. And when session was over, there was an opening in the library, and Marilyn hired me to be her assistant.
Okay, tell us who Marilyn is.
Marilyn Johnson was the legislative librarian for probably 30-some years.
And can you tell us what is, for folks who may not know this, what was the steno pool?
Well, it was just an area where all of the bills and resolutions got typed at that time, all the amendments. There was a proofreading staff. I happened to do the fiscal note process starting in 1983.
Okay. And you're at this, do you call it a booth? I was kind of struggling to think of a term to call it.
We call it the kiosk.
The kiosk? Okay. Mm-hmm. And you're at the kiosk every day. What time do you come in usually?
Well, we stagger our starting times. I come in at 7:30 2 days a week and 8:30 2 days a week, and then we rotate every other Friday.
And if I come up to the kiosk, what is it that's there for me in terms of information?
Well, hopefully anything that has you baffled. If you need directions to a room, if you want to know a conference committee that's meeting, if you need to speak to a legislator, hopefully we'll have an answer for you.
And you have copies of, like, the Senate and House daily calendars, do you not?
Yes, we do, along with the journals from the previous day.
And you have hearing schedules?
Yes.
And conference committee schedules?
We don't print the conference committee schedules because they're so fluid. We print one and it's out of date in a matter of minutes. But whenever anyone comes to ask, we print it for them while they wait. It just takes a minute.
And I understand that I was up there today looking around, and there's a little booklet that's produced by the Associated General Contractors that
Yes.
has some information in it.
Very helpful. We always encourage people to take one of those and a seating chart because the seating chart has the pictures in it.
And who produces the seating chart?
The Bankers Association.
And can you describe what it looks like?
Well, it's folded up very neatly, but when you unfold it, it becomes probably an 8.5 by 14 sheet of paper. And on one side is the Senate, and on the other is the House of Representatives, and they have everyone in their place. So if you're in the balcony, you can look at this seating chart and know you can identify who's speaking.
And the Associated General Contractors book, what kind of information does it have?
They have all of the legislative districts. They have all of the committee makeup. They have maps of the legislative areas. And they have the personal information for each legislator.
And what sort of questions do you... Okay, you're there in the kiosk, and you're there for, 8 hours a day, or is it longer?
Yes, it's usually 8. If they're still in session, one of us stays until they adjourn.
What's the most common question you get from folks?
The most common is, where's the bathroom?
Are there bathrooms close by?
There aren't. It's very limited on the first floor. We always direct them down to the ground floor. And they're incredulous that there's no restroom available close to the chambers. But there just is such a limited supply that it only takes care of the staff. So we do have to direct them downstairs.
Now, do you tell them that, there is a bathroom nearby, but it's reserved for the legislators?
Oh, we do not say that.
Good. What kind of training did you get to do this job? Or given your background, did you really need that much training?
The training was mostly on the computer. But in my case, I didn't need that the first session. Now they've completely redone their website, so I did need a lot of guidance this session.
What are some of the odd questions you get? Can you think of some examples?
Well, the one that I thought was the funniest, and it was only funny to me because I've worked in state government for almost 40 years, but this gentleman wanted to know what floor he could get his Social Security card on. And it was kind of hard to explain the difference between federal government and state government, when people just don't understand.
How old did you think this gentleman was?
I would say he was in his 20s.
Okay. And how did you answer that question?
I just told him that it was not located in the state capitol, but I could give him the address of where it was, and I told him that it was part of the federal government. Not sure if that clicked or not.
Did you tell him he'd need like a birth certificate and other things of that nature?
I didn't.
Oh, boy. How many questions do you answer in the course of a day?
Oh, well, just about everyone who comes up to us has a question, and we see lots of people every day. I would say hundreds, but that's probably an exaggeration.
Is it fun? Do you have fun?
It is fun. It's been a blast this session.
And what makes it fun?
Just the idea that you're helping a citizen. There's a lot of couples that come in, older couples. You can tell they've never been a part of the process and they're curious. And so when you give them a calendar, you tell them how they can get to the balcony. You ask them if they want to know who their personal legislators are. You can just see them kind of look at each other and smile like, why haven't we ever done this before? What happens when you get a question that you don't know the answer to? Well, I actually have Jay Beringroot on speed dial.
And tell us who Jay Beringroot is.
Jay Beringroot is the head of the legal staff in the Legislative Council, and he is always responsible for writing the rules. And most of the questions that I can't answer pertain to the rules. And instead of trying to look it up and waste time, I just call him, and he's always very gracious about answering.
Do people ask a lot of questions about rules?
Well, I had a question this session that I'm sure I should have known before, but it had just never come up. And the question was, in a conference committee, there has to be 4 people that agree. Does it have to be 2 from each chamber, or can it be 3 from one and 1 from another? And I know I should have known that after all these years, but I didn't. So I called Jay, and he said, yes, it has to be 2 from each chamber that have to agree.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about a conference committee is there have to be 2 House members and 2 senators that agree to something, and it doesn't matter what party they're in. I mean, you can have 2 Democratic senators and 2 Republican House members on the same that wouldn't happen here. But anyway, it doesn't matter what the partisan makeup of the committee is. What matters is there are 2 House members and 2 senators that have to agree to something for it to be endorsed by the conference committee. What was it like working in the Legislative Council library?
Oh, I really enjoyed it. We did a lot of work for the attorneys in the state who had cases in court. They were researching legislative background on, different bills that had become law at one point or another. And so it was always a very satisfying job. We did a lot of historical lists as well that get used all the time. Somebody might want to know who the majority leader was in the 1975 session, and so we always had a list that we could go to. And I thought that what we did was very beneficial.
The folks that approach you at the kiosk to ask a question, how is generally their demeanor? Do you get any folks that say, for example, are not, maybe they don't like the government?
Well, usually when they're not in session, the first thing they say is, what are they doing? Like they think they're doing nothing because they're not in session. And so when you explain to them that they have committee hearings all morning or they're in conference committees, then it's almost like they let out a sigh. It's kind of like they come up combative, but they leave in a different manner.
And so they think that maybe the legislators are lollygagging around, but then they find out that they're actually working?
Yes,
okay.
I get that impression.
Okay. For folks that come up to the Capitol, what's your advice for them in order to, prepare for this?
Just to be patient. There are some that are interested in a particular bill, and they'll come back day after day, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't get taken. They might skirt around it, they might lay it over, they might push it to the bottom of the calendar. And so I never am able to tell them concretely when it will be heard. Just that, they didn't do it at 8 o'clock. Maybe they'll do it at 1. And they get a little frustrated with that process.
What bills have you gotten a lot of questions about?
Well, right now it was the animal cruelty bill, which was finally settled today. But the other one is Senate Bill 2242. and that there's an amendment in there to change the makeup of a board, and that another bill had passed earlier this session. And so I have a number of people who inquire about that bill every day.
Yeah, that's the Heritage Fund bill, is it
Yes.
not? What we're talking about here is that there was a bill to create a Heritage Fund that would be administered by the State Industrial Commission, but there would be an advisory board to suggest grants out of this fund to the Industrial Commission for its review. The original bill was approved, and now there is an attempt afterward to change the makeup of the advisory board, specifically members of the board that represent conservation interests. The original bill had some specific organizations represented, such as Ducks Unlimited and I think Pheasants Forever, and the proposed change to who is on this advisory board says 4 people from the conservation community, but it is not specific as to which organizations they should belong to, and there's some disquiet about that amongst supporters of this conservation fund. You've in your job with the Legislative Council, your former job, you helped a lot with orientation, did you not? Orienting clerks and maybe legislators? I
was there, but I wasn't. Marilyn did most of that.
Okay. And what is it about the legislature that's interesting to you?
I just really enjoy the process. I've done it for so many years. It's just part of my life, I guess. And it has been so much fun coming back, especially this session. I just retired in 2010, and I went to work for the Legislative Assembly in 2011. So that was sort of same old, same old. But now I've had a break in between, and so this session I have just really enjoyed it.
There are a lot of temporary jobs in the legislature when it meets. What sort of advice would you have to someone, who's listening to you and thinking, maybe it would be cool to be involved in the process from the inside? And what sort of advice would you have for them in terms of how to get hired?
Well, the applications have to be signed by a legislator. It doesn't necessarily have to be your own, but to get involved so that you know who those people are.
And how did you get your job?
Well, I just applied. I had my own personal senator sign it, and I think I got my job because of my history with the Legislative Council.
We've been speaking to Audrey Grafsgaard. She is a person who works in the legislative kiosk, which provides advice and materials to people who visit the North Dakota legislature, and she answers questions and provides guidance to folks who don't necessarily know how the legislature works. Maybe they're up there and they're curious and they want to know what's going on. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
It's been great having you. This is Dale Wetzel. This is the Legislature Today radio program. We're coming to you from the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota.
Ever heard of a little thing called the Internet?
Wherever you are, we are. KFYR.com.
Daria, you can't spend the rest of your life in there.
I can once they put in my high-speed internet connection.
If you're looking for what's new at KFYR Radio, just go to KFYR.com. There'll be news, weather, ag news, and sports, plus your favorite personalities, contests, and a link to our Facebook page, KFYR.com.
Are you looking to advance your career but don't have your MBA? With University of Mary Worldwide, you can earn your MBA in areas such as energy management, healthcare, or management in as few as 18 months. Classes begin in February. All are online and available 24/7 so you can earn your degree around your schedule. University of Mary tuition is competitive. Its value unsurpassed and financial aid is available. Call toll-free 877-868-6279 today to learn more. 877-868-6279.
Theirs was a passion for listening to 1,500 live radio stations on their smartphones, a passion to create their own custom stations, a passion for using the Perfect 4 feature. Theirs was a passion for iHeartRadio.
What should we listen to now, my love?
How about all Beatles and
Still.
You temptress.
Download the free app passionately at iHeartRadio.com.
Traffic control class.
Did you know 50% of all businesses fail in the first 5 years? Hi, this is Paul with ABC Seamless. Keep this in mind when making your next siding or window purchase. You don't want to be one of those people who have nowhere to turn when the company goes down or leaves town. Here at ABC, we have been helping customers since 1978. We stand behind our products. My dad used to tell me, son, a warranty is like a check. You don't know if it's good until you go to cash it. ABC Seamless for your free estimate. ABC Seamless. Better products, better installation, and a better warranty.
Loud. Hey, you're all right.
It's auto auction time this Saturday at Northland Auto Auction.
So
call us at 663-1561 or check us out online at northlandautoauction.com. Come to buy, come to sell this Saturday at Northland Auto Auction in Mandan.
It reaches and plus, we broadcast in on a couple of stations.
Flying
and
objects.
Take
a trip to the strange
Fargo,
with
and
George Newer on Coast to Coast every night on KFire 550 and at KFYR.com.
It's you've got some
Hi, this is Corey Provis,
audience
the voice
size
of the
here.
Minnesota Twins.
Plus,
Here's
it's
just one
there's
more
a
reason
this
to love Fridays.
well, I'll send you a link to our website. It's why don't you I sent you both emails and they kind of bounced back. I don't know if these. Just write your email address on there.
We'll have plenty of fun
and
I'll
send you a link to our website, which has podcasts.
So we're going to be in a podcast.
Yes, correct.
Join me.
So I'll send you a link to that. So if you want to, post it on your Facebook page and send it around to your friends or whatever, you'll be able to do that. Thank
Fox
you.
News Radio. I'm Lisa
Thank you very
Luciano.
much.
One of the suspects in the Boston bombing
we will
was
start
investigated
in
for
about
terror
a minute and a
ties
half.
2 years ago.
A U.S. intelligence
And,
official confirms to Fox News that the CIA was contacted by the Russian counterparts in September 20th
it is
and
pretty
presented
cool, I
with
think.
virtually the same information the
you look
FBI
and
was given
see
6
who's
months
drinking
earlier.
with whom and,
That the Russians
and,
believed Tamerlan Tsarnaev
look
was
out
a
the
follower
window
of
and-
radical Islam
Sorry,
and wanted to join an overseas terrorist group.
It's a lot better.
More details being released
It's
about
more
the shooting
interesting now
deaths
that
of 5 people in a tiny
it's
west
dark.
central Illinois
It's
town.
still light
Police say
outside.
44-year-old Rick Smith of rural Morgan County, Illinois, busted through the back door of a
that
Manchester
makes it a
apartment
bit,
and shot 5 people
a
at
bit
close
better in
range.
terms of being able to see what's going
children,
on.
an adult male,
and
2 adult females.
Lieutenant Colonel Todd Kilby.
Fox Radio's Jennifer Kuiper. A 6-year-old girl was hurt. Police
I
say the
find that
suspect
book
took
very
her
useful,
to a
of
neighbor.
course.
Smith was shot by
Well,
police and
number
died at the
question,
hospital.
you know.
Fox News.
Well,
we
the state
report, you
spends money
decide.
to print those things. Might as well take a look at
Yeah,
them.
yeah. Yeah, I've got it. I've got a hard copy, and I've also got it downloaded.
Still in air traffic control mode.
All right. I'm going to ask you to do some air traffic control rap just for that.
The Legislature Today show continues. Don't forget to check local listings for a nightly recap on a cable access channel near you. The Legislature Today, hosted by Dale Wetzel, managing editor of Great Plains News and the Great Plains Examiner. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, too. And now, back to the Legislature Today show.
This is Dale Wetzel. This is the Legislature Today show. We're coming to you from the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota. This is the University of Mary hour on the Legislature Today. The University of Mary is one of our primary sponsors, and we appreciate their support a great deal because if we didn't have it, we wouldn't have a show. The University of Mary is in Bismarck. It is a Roman Catholic institution, and it is headed by Monsignor Shea, who is an incredibly dynamic individual, and the folks that we've had on from the University of Mary have been quite knowledgeable and interesting to talk to, and I certainly would check it out as a possibility for a college. We're on the second half hour of our show. We're going to be speaking to Shane Gerbert. He's the State Governmental Affairs Commissioner, a lobbyist for students at the University of North Dakota. We're also going to be speaking to Mr. Robert Valley, who is a lobbyist from NDSU, a student lobbyist, and a former student member of the State Board of Higher Education. Welcome, gentlemen. Mr. Gerbert, you apparently are you do a rather interesting air traffic control rap. Let's hear some of that.
Well, my training is in air traffic control. That's my major. Kind of funny I'm in the legislature. But yeah, these headphones, I feel like I'm in air traffic control. I'll give you some just as requested. So
sure.
It's like
Please do.
United 710, 30 miles from Woody. Turn right heading 310. Maintain 3000 until established on the localizer. Cleared ILS runway 28 right approach.
That sounds outstanding. You could be an auctioneer too if you want. But gentlemen, one of the things I was curious about is what does a student lobbyist do?
Well, that's
just describe your work to me.
Well, basically, in terms of the work that at least I did 2 years ago on behalf of NDSU students, and even my time on the state board, it's basically representing your constituents, that being the student body of your respective institution. At least for me, 2 years ago, it was representing the 14,407 students of North Dakota State University, dealing with needs and concerns ranging from the overall higher education bill, tuition and fees, capital projects, anything that students feel that they need to have a voice to. That was, at least for me, that was where my job came into play, to make sure that the legislature understood that position.
And what are you doing this session, sir?
I'm just a student who's about to graduate in a couple of weeks here, and I've been passionate about higher education, and I certainly just try to help out where I can with things.
And what do you intend to do once you graduate?
Well, right now, I guess hopefully to walk across that stage, and I'm currently applying to UND's law program, so we'll wait back to hear and see what they do with that.
What is your degree in?
History with a minor in political science.
And Mr. Gerbert, what are you doing at the legislature?
Well, pretty much kind of bridging off of what Mr. Valley said, it's basically the same thing. I'm given a resolution passed by our student government that's been discussed with our constituents at UND. Take that message to the legislature, saying, talk to definitely the key people, some other legislators, saying, hey, for example, we want to look at capital projects, or we want to look at our tuition and fees this semester. Let's see if we can have a sit-down talk and work on that. So it's kind of continuing the conversation that's been had by my predecessors, my counterparts at NDSU, and throughout the state. So,
and what issues do you like to concentrate on, both of you?
Well, I think that's sort of, in part of it, there are some universal ones, obviously, that all institutions have concerns for. Obviously, this session, it's dealing with 2003, the overall higher education budget, ensuring that the dollars are in the appropriate spots, whether it's for capital projects, it's ensuring tuition and fees are kept at a reasonable level. Obviously, this session, we're all concentrated on 2200, the governor's new funding proposal, hopefully to change how our institutions of higher education are funded, not only in terms of ensuring the dollars go to the right schools, but they're being given to the schools fairly and equitably. And then, of course, for campuses, it may be very well different. At least in my time, NDSU was very concerned about ensuring capital projects were constructed specifically in classroom areas for some of our largest programs and colleges by population. And I know UND has dealt with some other ones concerning tuition and fees in the past, and I'm sure Shane can cover a few of those too.
Yeah, some of the things we've been talking about, one of them, of course, every year that we have a conversation is just the tuition free, seeing if it's viable. It wasn't seeing it's viable. Didn't pass last time, didn't pass this time, but as long as we kind of keep it within the legislature's mind that, as students, at the end of the day, we're the ones who also foot the bill along with the state of North Dakota, so it's just an idea, especially in the long term, to keep our loan debt down, since a lot of people are paying for our schooling, either ourselves or maybe our parents are getting it, or a lot of us are paying through loans. So in the end of the day, if you could reduce that number, it's just a better idea for one. Even if it just, instead of a 4% cap, a 2.5% cap. So,
what sort of tuition increases are being discussed in terms of the higher education budget?
Well, at least from what I have heard, and some of it is very dependent on what happens with 2200, the governor's new funding proposal, and obviously the dollars that may or may not be put in 2003. If things were funded at the levels that have been recommended by the governor, if the language to the governor's funding proposal was left alone as he had proposed it, my understanding, at least with NDSU, they're looking at a roughly 3.9% increase in tuition for the biennium. And a lot of the institutions, it's not necessarily set as to NDSU and UND are at 4, and the other institutions are at different rates. Depending on the funding level, you may see an institution, again, not saying these are the actual numbers, but you may have institution X who's at a 1.6%. You may have another institution who's at 3, or you may have something in between. So it varies. But I think what we've seen is, I think the highest we're looking at is a little over 4%.
But is this per year or over 2 years?
I believe it would be over the 2 years.
Okay. Mr. Gerbert, do you think what do you think about that as a tuition increase? Do you think that's reasonable or not?
Well, seeing what other states have done in dire straits, for example, California, who are just plain poor, can't pay for anything, it's pretty reasonable. We'd, of course, like it to be much lower than that, but sometimes in the long run, you have to realize as students, we do want the best value for our money, but sometimes you have to pay. You get in what you get out, if you kind of follow what I'm saying. So 4% is fair. It's better than 8%. It's better than 16% than I've seen in other states. So 4 is a pretty good, reasonable round number. I mean, ideally, you'd want it less, but if you could settle on 4, then I guess we got to do what we got to do.
What is your gentleman's impression as to the impact that student lobbyists have on the legislature? Do you think that you, as a group, that you get the respect that you should?
Well, I think it's a give and take. Certainly for myself, coming in last session, that obviously NDSU, rightly or wrongly, it had some concerns with its institution, obviously with Dr. Joe Chapman, some of the concerns with the President's House, and obviously some of the concerns overall with higher education, rightly or wrongly. For myself, I made it a mission that I was going to work with legislators. I was going to pursue that student voice. More importantly, I was going to pursue it throughout the entire 80 days of the session. I was going to be on the ground all 80 days, whether I had a bill to testify on or not. And at least I'd like to think for myself that even though I may not have accomplished all I wanted to do, ranging from the 24 pieces of legislation we testified on to the $6 million in capital projects we as students pursued on behalf of our institution, on behalf of our fellow students, even coming back today, that I have a relationship and I have a credibility and respect with legislators that even though they may not like my ideas, they're at least willing to give me a shot to hear what I have to say before they may turn me down or may say, no, we can't go with that. So I think student lobbyists can be very powerful, especially past what they may hear from an administrator or folks within who are paid in higher education in order to do these things.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Branching off of what Mr. Valley said, we certainly enhance the message that's put out there because you have the administrators, they're there, but we students are here first and foremost, most of the times on a volunteer basis. We're either missing classes or missing work to be here. Like I did for the interim session, worked at Menards, didn't have to worry about too many missed shifts. But during the session, I'm here, get a stipend, and I'm here much more hours than that. It's like $0.01 an hour. I kind of did the between the road. The thing is that it is very much about credibility, and it's very much about building those relationships. And I was very fortunate to be here in the interim, so I could meet those people, so I could build that relationship. And the thing is this is my first time, I guess second time, but first time in an actual legislative session, and I'm really pleased with how generally well received that students are. So they hear our concerns as people representing our constituency. They hear what we have to say, which is, I feel personally, is sometimes not always heard the strongest, and sometimes gets put up to the side or to the back. So a student lobbyist, it's kind of saying, hey, we're the students, and we just want to be heard. We may not always agree on it, but we just want to make sure that we have a point of view and that it's transmitted to them. So as a messenger and pretty much everything else, it's a pretty decent effect. So
to what extent, if any, do you work with the college administrators?
Well, I think that depends on the individual who's in the position. For myself, before I came into the session, I sat down with administrators, I sat down with deans, I sat down with professors, folks from faculty and staff, only to try to understand specifically what it was they were dealing with from their perspective. And it didn't mean that it was the thing I was going to talk to legislators about, but to understand if they were having at least the case that NDSU made last session and has made even into the interim before this new funding proposal was out, that we've been unfairly funded, that we've been underfunded, and it's caused very serious problems to our programs and to how we serve students. I wanted to talk to administrators who made that case. I wanted to understand exactly why it is that they were making this case, to give me examples to understand exactly from their perspective what it was, so that I could hone it in if it was truly a student concern or if it was just simply a concern that administrators were doing based on their needs in order to be able to serve students. So you can work with them extensively on things, especially if you don't have the knowledge, but that all depends on what kind of a message you're working on or what objectives you're working on at that point.
Pretty much, it's the same deal with me. The administrators, they first and foremost told me that they're not here in their conversation with me to they're there to guide me, but not to sort of sway my opinion. They're to say I went to them for guidance. So if there was this numbers thing, for example, on the appropriations bill, well, how would X affect Y? They were never there to say, hey, I think you should say this. It was more of, hey, I don't know how the commerce bill is connected to UND, and I got that clarity from them. So it's more of a guidance than them setting the agenda for us.
What is your gentleman's general impression of how the higher education budget is going? Do you think it's adequate?
Well, based on the House amendments, I would have to disagree with it. Not necessarily in terms of the dollar amounts, but in the terms of how those dollars are going to be distributed. In terms of what the House has done as of late, they've placed roughly $160 million in capital projects, which would have been for programs such as the medical school at UND, or for NDSU, the new STEM building, which is a classroom and lab facility that we need on our campus. And they put it into a large pool of money that is to be divvied out by the Chancellor and by the State Board of Higher Education based on a priority listing only if certain terms and conditions are met in terms of a utilization space study, and also a 10% match in private dollars if the project's over $10 million. So in terms of it, there are some hoops and measures that I don't quite understand, that I don't understand the justification to, and I feel that it makes certain processes that have been in previous sessions very straightforward, and to the point as I've understood it, are now all of a sudden that they're being targeted in a way that makes no sense to me. So I think in terms of dollar amounts, we're around about the same place where the governor recommended, the Senate wanted it to be. But just some of the actions of how they want to distribute it now based on the House amendments are a little bit concerning, and it does not quite understand.
Mr. Gerber, what's your impression of the budget?
I'm going to very much echo what Mr. Valley said on that one, especially kind of paraphrase. The money's there, it's pretty good, it's just where the money is and how it's going to get divvied up to us, because it is nice to go to the legislature and have them, because historically they're the ones who help prioritize the capital projects for us. The state board would usually go through a process that this capital project's 1, 2, and then we go to the legislature. They would say the same thing. They would give us specific earmarks for specific projects instead of just having the capital funding pool. So in terms of this, it's, we got some things to work out, but we'll get through it somehow. Just these continuing conversations with that credibility we made.
What do you think specifically of the thing that you mentioned, Mr. Valley, about the idea of having, rather than the legislature deciding what gets built and where, essentially you're going to have the Chancellor and the Board of Higher Education deciding what gets built and where, based upon the limitations of a large pot of money that they're going to be given?
Well, honestly, I find it a bit concerning in terms of especially the communications the legislature has passed in terms of House Concurrent Resolution 3047, which is dissolving the State Board of Higher Education as we know it and placing in a new governing structure. So it becomes very confusing to me, even though I believe in the structure of the board as it is currently, and that the problem is personalities, not the structure, that we are now all of a sudden putting an extremely large amount of money in a pool that is to be divvied out by a board that theoretically has already prioritized its projects based on its criterion, and that it was given to the legislature to decide that the board believes all these projects are worthwhile and this is the ones we think should be funded first before others, but that the legislature is the one who ultimately decides if those projects truly do deserve a dollar amount, like the medical school or the law school or the STEM building. If they think the first, second, and fifth priorities are the ones that need funding based on what they believe are the needs of the state, they're obviously the keeper of the money, and they do that appropriately. So I think giving money to individuals that the legislature has said, at least legislatively, that they don't necessarily trust or they have concerns with is a little bit odd, and I don't quite understand it.
Mr. Gerber, what do you think about this idea of having a money pool that the Board of Higher Education and the Chancellor would decide how it's spent?
Well, as I kind of we didn't allude to, we just did it in the beginning of the story. I'm air traffic control, and one of the basic tenets of air traffic control is do it right the first time. You get it done, you put the pieces where they need to be, you talk to the people that you got to talk to, and you get it where it needs to be. Now, we're not talking about airplanes in this case, but we're talking about capital projects. And, the idea that we ought to go back to the state board and do it again, it's doable, but logistically, there are some time-sensitive issues with, say, the law school, or what if the cost of the med school goes up in terms of that? Then we have to redo those estimates, and like Mr. Valley said before, those are prioritized beforehand, so we just might as well do it the first time and get her done.
And Mr. Wessel, if I may add on to what Mr. Gerwich said, in terms of it to another factor, that obviously you have a set amount of money that the legislature is looking at doing. Obviously, just even with the medical school alone, you're looking at there were 3 different options when I was on the board that were presented to us that ranged from roughly $38 million to around $120, $130 on the higher end. If the board decided to go with the medical school, the $120, $130 million range, that takes a large chunk of that money out right then and there for a lot of capital projects that are needed on our campuses. And then you have, I think it becomes the concern that there could be some infighting between campuses of trying to secure what's left of that money, especially UND trying to deal with its law school program that is under threat of losing its accreditation because the building is not adequate for the program at this point in time, and even for NDSU with its needs in terms of space for our campus, or take any of the other campuses who have buildings that are in very much need or have safety concerns, or just there is some need on their campus to fix it so that it better serves students and the communities they're a part of. So it adds another element of everyone's going to fight each other in order to be able to get what little or what limited money is there that may not help the system but rather harm it.
And add on to that, there are people who kind of argue already that the university system is loosely federated. I don't think we need to do anything more to separate ourselves further from campuses. We ought to becoming more integrated, and this infighting probably wouldn't solve that to that end.
I'd like to ask both of you gentlemen about what you think about the constitutional amendment that we alluded to earlier. House Concurrent Resolution 3047 is going to be on the ballot next year, and it would replace the Board of Higher Education and the Chancellor with a 3-member higher education commission. And these people would be appointed by the governor. They'd be full-time. They'd serve 4-year terms. And what do you gentlemen think about how this new governance structure, do you think it's a good idea?
Well, I guess the legislature has made their say to it. At least they have passed something they believe the people should decide on. I would say, based on my experiences, and I'll say it straightforward, that I sincerely believe that the structure that we currently have for a state board ultimately can do great things. And I think there's even untapped potential, as not only does the board act as a policymaker, but it can act in a way where it can properly communicate to legislators and the public what a natural resource higher education can be to our communities and to the state, and helping to bring new ideas and new innovations to this state. But unfortunately, it's become an issue of personalities. And that obviously, in my belief, the personalities have ultimately made the board, or the structure of it as it is, look like it cannot work whatsoever. I think that what the proposal that has been passed by the Senate amendments and then approved by the House is better than what was originally proposed by Representative Carlson. But I think there are still some concerns there, namely that there is no student representation. There is no representation of other individuals who obviously have a stake, namely faculty and staff, at least in a way where they are ensured that at the very minimum they have a voice guaranteed, or at least in terms of a student position, a position that I held, not only having a voice but also having a vote to support my fellow students in those concerns. So I think the structure, it's an interesting concept, and obviously the people will decide, but I think if people want to solve the problem, it's personalities on the board and how board members are chosen rather than the structure of it.
It was an interesting process to watch, that the fact that it was first defeated in the Senate when it was put over there and reconsidered a couple times and then finally passed again. And again, when I stood up there in the hearing for 3047, I argued against it essentially for the reason that we don't get our full student representation, and that's because in the current form as it stands, 3047 would have it so that we would be put on a advisory board that's optional instead of having our full-fledged voting member on the board. One of the 3 people on this new commission is someone, quote, who has to be recommended by, quote, a higher education interest. So that could be either the students or the faculty or the staff, when right now you have a voting student member, an advisor from the staff, and an advisor from the faculty. So while unfortunately that the faculty and the staff member cannot vote, that they're there at the table, they have that input and the same speaking rights as everyone else.
I was thinking that the 3-member board, essentially there's one qualification that one of the people basically be a business person, another one that be an academic or someone who's associated with the university system in some way, and then the third person could be anyone. And do you think that that's a good mix?
Well, I think it's a good mix, but I'd argue, even in my time on the board, right now we have an individual who has been involved in academia, who is a voting member. Dr. Kirsten Dietrich was a professor at Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota, before she came onto the board. Currently, we have a couple of individuals in private industry. Don Morton, who runs the Fargo campus of Microsoft, We have Kathleen Nessett, who runs her own independent business out of Tioga. And even we have former legislators and individuals who have worked in private sector experience or have, to some degree, in certain fields, private sector experience or even academic experiences. So I think it's a good mix that you get a little bit of the private industry that obviously has its workforce needs, higher ed having a voice at the table theoretically, and then that wild card, as you put it. But even within the current structure of the board that we do have to a degree that mix, maybe some more than others depending on the rotation, but we do have that mix even still at this point.
Pretty much agree with Mr. Valley on that. I mean, I was happy to work with, even before we had some retiring members, we had General Haug, who was in the Air National Guard, and he brought in an entirely different experience, and member Klaus Lemke, who left the board, who works for the Realtors. So when you look at just the board, I was walking through one of our older buildings, Hughes Art Center. I mean, the president of the board back in 1976 was a reverend. So there's more opportunities for a better mix with the 8 people just off of the sheer numbers than there is with the 3. But you're still getting a decent mix. It's just essentially a smaller number.
Mr. Shane Gerbert, tell me about yourself. Where are you from originally?
Well, kind of a long story. Born in California, raised and grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Las Vegas, Nevada. All right.
And then, came up to UND because of aviation, and staying here because they tapped me for the legislative session to become the Gov Affairs Commissioner. So there's my story in a nutshell.
Mr. Valley, where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Christine, North Dakota, or give it another 20 years away, South Fargo. I grew up or graduated from Richland 44 in Colfax, North Dakota. Did speech and debate for many years in high school. Been at NDSU now since 2008, and then have been working on behalf of in a civil service capacity for a lot of things, FFA, student government, even with the state board, and that's sort of me in a nutshell.
We've been speaking to Mr. Robert Valley, whose voice you just heard. He is a former student member of the State Board of Higher Education, and he is a student at NDSU who is looking to graduate this spring and go to law school eventually, hopefully at a brand new or a newly renovated building at the University of North Dakota. We also have with us Mr. Shane Gerbert, who is the State Governmental Affairs Commissioner at the University of North Dakota, and these two men have been working as lobbyists during the legislative session and trying to impress upon legislators the importance of higher education budgets and the need to keep tuition down. And gentlemen, thank you for your time.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for coming. This is Dale Wetzel. This has been the Legislature Today.
The Cenex stores in Bismarck, Dickinson, Lincoln, Mandan, and Sterling are each giving away a charbroiled gas grill. This charbroiled grill is a commercial grade 40,000 BTU 4-burner grill with the side burner. You could be the